Hi, it's Mitch from Hard Intentions, and I'm honored to have a guest on tonight, Tommy from, well, uh, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name's Tommy Winfrey. And you're gonna say where I was from, imagine, but that's kind of complicated because I moved around a lot when I was a kid.
All right.
So for the most part, I grew up in Southeast Texas till I was about 9, and then
All right.
I moved to Los Angeles at the age of 9, and I grew up from there until the time I was incarcerated at the age of 19.
All
Uh,
right. Oh, so you grew up pretty much in LA then.
yeah, I would say that was my more informative years. That's where I would consider home. I now reside in San Diego, which is feels like home now to me. I've been out here
All right.
almost 2 years.
Yeah, so like when you moved to LA from Texas, was that a result of like something going on with your family, or they just decided to
Yeah,
move, or
no, it was the recession hit pretty bad in the mid '80s in Texas, and the oil economy kind of fell through. That's was a major economy out there. So
all right.
my family struggled. We were pretty poor growing up,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
we moved out to LA so my dad could work.
All right, all right. So did you grow up in a home with both your mom and your dad, or?
Yeah, I had both parents in the house, and until my dad died, he was married to my mom for like 40 years, and
All
he
right,
died when I was incarcerated in 2010. So
all
it's
right.
been 10 years now. Yeah.
So you got any brothers or sisters and all that kind of stuff, or?
Yeah, I have three brothers. They all live out in Southeast Texas. They all moved back with my family when they moved
All
back.
right, all right, all right.
Yeah.
So growing up in LA, did you? I mean, you got arrested when you were 19.
Yeah, I was 19 when I committed my crime
So
and was arrested.
did you have any trouble with the law like prior to that?
Yeah, I was probably first arrested at the age of 13 for stealing a bike with my little brother.
Yeah,
And he got in a lot more trouble than I did growing up. He was the black sheep, but I ended up in prison with a life sentence, and
all right,
he's doing great now.
yeah. So like, did you mess around with like drugs or any of that kind of stuff, or you just have like rebellious attitude, or what was going on there?
Uh, it was a little both. I was a quiet, shy kid, and my father was an alcoholic, and I was always that kid that felt like he needed to be the peacemaker in the family. And so, at the age of 12, 13 years old, I discovered marijuana. I started smoking weed almost daily by the time I was 14 years old, and got into harder drugs when I was 16, 17. And by the time I was 19 and was arrested, I was a full blown meth addict. I had to more than experiment with almost every drug out there. But,
Yeah.
as I grew up, in prison, I kind of learned a lot about myself and realized, that's what I was doing to cope with the stress that uh, I put on myself by thinking I need to solve all my problems, all my family's problems.
So you were pretty hardcore using meth, and by the time you got arrested,
Oh yeah, I tell people that I probably stayed up in a year's time. I probably slept 30 days when I was arrested,
yeah,
and that's hard for most people to imagine that being possible. But
yeah,
that's exactly where I was at when I was a
yeah.
teenager.
I went through that phase too. Right prior to my arrest, I was on the same kick. So yeah, that was. Did you have like older cats influencing you to use drugs, or you just kind of fell in the wrong crowd, or what was going on there?
I always kind of hung out with older cats. And in my neighborhood, I drifted towards the guys that were doing drugs, so it was a little of both.
Yeah,
I definitely chose to use drugs, but they were an influence on me. And once I got a taste of it, I really enjoyed it because, like I said, it took my mind off what was going on in reality, and kind of put me in a different headspace.
yeah. It's kind of an escape. Yeah. And so you didn't get busted for drugs though during the time you were using it,
I had been arrested a few times prior to my life conviction,
right?
and every time I got arrested, I had drugs on me.
Yeah,
but I never really got arrested for selling them or anything like that. It was more of just, I was committing other felonies and was
Yeah,
possessing at the same time.
yeah. So when you're 19, you got arrested. You got a life crime. So you want to talk about that at all? I mean, even if you just want to say like maybe what you were arrested for, I don't, you know,
No,
details. That's up to you. You know.
I'm a pretty open book. I lived a lot of my life when I was younger in the shadows, and trying to stay not to be seen, and didn't let people know what was going on with me. And I kind of found out that's not the best way to live. So I'm pretty transparent in the work I do right now too. I feel like that's helped me being transparent. But to get back to my crime, at the age of 19, I took another man's life. I was convicted of second-degree murder. It had a lot to do with drugs. He owed me some money, and we got into some disputes about that. And that was the surface of it. But really, I felt like nobody was taking me serious. I felt a lot of pressure on myself. This is what I had to do, be a man. I was getting punked. He was trying to punk me, and I was going to show him I wasn't nobody's punk.
Right.
And that mentality, I realized, got me into a lot of trouble. And I also was living other people's values, what other people were putting on top of me, and me just blindly choosing to believe in that. It took
Right.
a long time for me to realize that.
So that's kind of a thing in that lifestyle when you're buying, using, and selling drugs. If somebody burns you or treats you like a chump, it's kind of like, you feel like you need to step up and show them that you're not their bitch or whatever. Otherwise, you get the feeling like everyone will run over you. Um, so you found yourself sitting in county jail with this charge. Did you have like a jury trial or you take a deal or what happened there? You're in LA County Jail?
Yeah, I got arrested in Orange County, but my uh, charges were LA County. When I got to LA County, I fought it, and I went all the way to jury trial, and I was convicted of second-degree murder.
Mm,
Uh, yeah, that was a long process, about a year in the county jail,
right.
fighting that. Um, I knew I was guilty. Everybody in the world knew I was guilty. It was just a matter of formality of
Yeah.
getting through a trial.
Yeah, part of that lifestyle too is you don't want to cop to anything. You never admit guilt. You never face up to no. It's kind of to me, it's kind of a way to not face up to what I done, but also it's like you never want to admit to nothing. It's like deny everything. Mentality.
Definitely, definitely, it's a very adversarial system. It's not based on solving any amount of problems. It's about the prosecution getting the most time out of you they can, and
Right.
defense attorneys come in and tell you, you can't even plead guilty um, unless the DA offers you some kind of deal, which never happened in mine. So, it the victim's family, they don't get any resolution out of it. There's this big
Right.
movement, restorative justice, right now about repairing the harm
Right.
that you do to your communities, and none of that is taking place in our justice system how it's set up right now.
Yeah. So you were sitting in the county jail for a year with this, case. And I imagine you were surrounded by guys, fighting cases, and a lot of them maybe have been to prison. And so, did they have any influence on like your mentality as far as like the mindset that you went to prison with?
Definitely, it was just a continuation where I was at on the streets. A lot of my older homeboys that had done time that I looked up to, told me how I should act, what I should do, what I
Right.
should believe, and that carried into the county jail, into the prison system. I was willing and ready to do whatever it took to prove to everybody else that I was a man and I wasn't going to be taken advantage of. Um,
Right.
that kind of just went hand in hand where I was at and what the system in front of me looked like. You know, after I got older and I started to realize certain things about my life, I really realized my world was really small and limited. And I grew up in this very violent world where everybody around me believed that's how you should solve your problems. And so I took on that identity. I took on what was around me and what was handed to me.
Right.
My family definitely, didn't teach me that I should go around killing people, but um, they try to instill better values in me. But definitely the people around me that I looked up to, my influences in life, thought that was I was behaving how I was supposed to behave.
Right. Right. And then it kind of gets normalized after a while. You come to see this aggressive, violent behavior, as normal. And so you sat around the county jail. So when you went to the reception center, where did you head off to?
I went to Delano State Prison. It's like outside of Bakersfield, California, a small little farming town in the middle of
Right.
nowhere, a bunch of prisons in the area.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Prison Valley. So,
Yeah.
how long were you there in the reception?
I was only in reception a couple months, if that. I was in and out. They sent me on the first bus smoking to a newer prison at that time called High Desert State Prison.
Right,
That's where I
right.
spent almost the next decade of my life, my whole 20s.
Yeah. And now High Desert Prison now is a very notorious prison. It's one of the most violent prisons in California, actually. Now, I remember when it opened, so everyone thought it was going to be a great programming level 4 prison, but now it's a warehouse, and it's just very violent. And so when you went there, I mean, you're geared up to go to level 4, which I'm sure by now you're kind of learning about the prison system, being in the county for a year, and then to reception. So, what was your mindset now that you find yourself in this brand new level 4 prison? What kind of mindset did you go in there with?
I think I was pretty numb to the world. I had given up on the fact that I was ever going to get out of prison. Everybody around me told me, "Oh, you have a life sentence." I got sentenced to 25 years to life. That you're never going home. This is your new home. Um, and I was pretty influenced by the guys around me, and wanting to earn my bones just like uh, they did, and you know. So I was game for anything that came my way. A lot of people asked me if I was scared to go in an environment like that, and looking back, I couldn't recognize that fear in myself. But there was definitely a part of me that had to be scared because I was willing to do just about anything, to survive. And
Right,
that was really the mentality I was in, survival mode. I was willing to go with the flow if everything was relaxed and chill, but I was also willing to do whatever it took to make it.
right,
And that's very dangerous because I feel like a lot of people on those yards in those environments are willing to just adapt to whatever they have to do, and it just
right,
takes one knucklehead to really create a shitstorm.
right.
And but
All it
that's
takes is
that was one.
one guy saying he's running the yard to want to cause havoc, and yeah,
Yeah, and the older I got, the more I could see like of the world view instead of just my little limited view. I saw a lot of it had to revolve around drugs and power and money, and that's really what it was about.
right.
Um,
So you're a young guy, and I imagine they had some older cats there, and that's around the time Three Strikes was kind of happening, right? And so, did you see like older cats trying to use up the younger guys or anything like that, or what? How did you kind of see the movement on the yard as far as older guys, younger guys?
yeah, I think it was split pretty evenly between younger guys and older guys. I was on a what they call a 180 design yard at first.
Right,
It is the highest security outside of the shoes. Uh, and half the guys were young like me and were ready and willing to do whatever the older guys told them that they should be doing. And the older guys definitely took advantage of that.
yeah. Unfortunately, that happens a lot. So after a while, how long were you on a 180 yard?
I was only on a 180 yard a little over a year and a half, and I went down to what they call a 270 design, which is a little bit more open of
Right.
a level 4 prison, a little
So
bit
you
more
were still
people.
level 4, but you got to bump down to a 270.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
And that's the design of the inside of the building for people who don't know. 180 yards, the staff have complete visual contact with the whole building, and 270 buildings just a little more looser. So, as you went down in custody, did you eventually go down to level 3 up in Susanville area?
Yeah, I went to level 3 inside of High Desert State Prison, and I was there for about a half a decade in the level 3 facility in High Desert.
Right. So how did things change at all? Like, were guys going from level 4 down to level 3 with you at the same time, or what was did the mindset change a little bit?
Yeah, because I spent over 9 years in that prison. I was around the same guys from level 4 to level 3, and I knew a lot of people. Um, and so, like, I was in that prison extremely long time, but so were some of the other guys. And
Yeah,
it did relax a little bit when I got down to the level 3 as far as the pressure and always being vigilant, but it was still there, still present. A lot of drugs still, a lot more drugs probably on the level 3 yard. And I
yeah,
got pretty deep into them for a little while.
yeah, yeah. So, did they have any like programs up there? Did you take advantage of any programs, or did you have any? I mean, like vocation or GED stuff, or was your mindset like even touching on those type of things, or were you just like survival, daily grind type stuff, or
Yeah, they had a few locations up there, but I never really participated in many of them.
right?
It wasn't about learning a new trade or any of that stuff. I had already had a high school diploma before I even got arrested. I was fortunate enough to graduate high school.
Okay,
Um, but yeah, it wasn't about me taking any accountability for the reasons I was there. It was still about survival, me trying to see what I could work, what kind of deals I could work, get a hustle on the yard and, just survive, whether it was making wine, to bring in some money so I could do
yeah.
drugs. It was still on the hustle tip.
So, did you have a job while you were there?
Yeah, I had a lot of jobs. The one I stayed in the longest was working in the chow hall at night, though. We had a
Yeah,
pretty good crew, and I stayed in that job probably for 5 years.
yeah, yeah. So, when you left High Desert, where did you go to from there?
I ended up going to a prison in San Luis Obispo called California Men's Colony.
Right?
And I was there for about 3 years, and that's where my whole world started to change.
Yeah. So, for people that don't know, like High Desert is a real structured, stressful place, and so CMC, California Men's Colony, it was actually created as an experiment to get away from the prison. Don't call it a prison, call it a colony. Everyone has a key to their own cell. So, what was that like going? It's a super lax place, especially it was still pretty lax when you got there, I think. What was that like? I mean, that had to be kind of culture shock.
Um, so it was a culture shock. It was also a shock on me because I developed type 1 diabetes right when I got there. I knew I was sick when I got off the bus. And I was facing a lot of demons inside myself with the prison politics, or whether I should be in this institution that had a lot of guys that had done crimes that I shouldn't be around them. As the politics were played there,
Yeah,
and then I had to really look at myself when I was getting sick, and I wasn't telling anybody. I didn't go report it to the doctor. I eventually went blind and could see about 2 feet in front of me, and I walked around the yard for about 30 days like that. And finally, I walked into the medical and told them, there's something wrong with me. And immediately, they diagnosed I had diabetes and got me on insulin. But while I was there, I was in the welding class, and I started to learn that trade, and I really liked it. And I started to take college courses, and pretty soon I start to realize I didn't know jack shit about the world. Um, Also, at that time, my dad was the way his life was almost over. You know, I could see he was dying, and there had been a lot of issues there with him and and I started to try to resolve some of those.
Yeah.
I was still a pretty angry kid,
Were you
and
getting visits?
I was getting visits every couple of years from my parents because they lived back in Texas, and that was about it. Uh, but you know, there was a lot of things that I was facing internally, and I got involved really a lot with the Otis religion, and started to identify with that and start to find myself. And I start for the first time in my life, not to blame my victim for making me kill him, and start taking some accountability and say, hey, that was a decision I made, and think about some of
Right.
the harm I had done in my community. And that was a big moment of transition in my life, the 3 years I was there.
Right. So, some of that realization about, the victims and all that kind of stuff did that come about like just through internal thought or self-reflection, or did you get into some programs or what?
No, I wasn't really doing any programs. I think it had a combination of doing first time I was in college and realized I didn't know shit about the world, and like starting to think about where my mentality had come from. And you know, I was
Yeah.
just having some internal realizations. I was getting a little bit older. I had turned 30, and I just started thinking about life and thinking about, you know, what would happen if something happened to my family, how I would feel, you know, some of the things naturally that I had to face for me just being on the yard and thinking of myself in a certain way, and seeing like why I was thinking of myself like I was a piece of shit or something like that, when I hadn't told on anybody, I hadn't done anything bad to anybody, you know,
Yeah.
why I was feeling that way. And I came to the realization I had adopted a lot of beliefs people had just handed to me and never even really thought about why they made sense, you know. It was the first time I really started to think about where my values came from, truly.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. You reach a point in time I did where I started questioning, like, why do I believe this? And some of the things you get told over time, you start questioning, like, is this real? Is this factual? Is this bullshit or what? So I can identify with that. And then, so you got to start into welding and Odinism and that kind of stuff. And then you got transferred from there. Your points go
Yeah,
down again.
yeah. I ended up in San Quentin about 3 years after I got to CMC,
Right. Right.
and that was a whole different world. All of a sudden, there's all these free people walking around. All these guys I knew from level 4 yard 2 were there, and
Yeah.
they welcomed me, and there was a college on site, and I was excited about it, like, oh, I was going to get to go to college. And then eventually I started participating in groups, even though I was resistant to that at first, and talking about my feelings, and started unpacking a lot of that trauma that I've had in my life and what led me to the place where I
Yeah.
was at.
I remember when you came to San Quentin. I knew some of the guys you're in high desert with, and they told me, hey, this is a good dude right here, So and I saw it right away, that you weren't just average Joe Schmo, dope fiend, convict kind of guy. I took a liking to you straight away. You're pretty, you're a good dude, man. And so,
I think I'm getting blushed here.
yeah. So, how long were you in San Quentin?
So I ended up in San Quentin about 7.5 years total before I went
Right.
home. I went home from San Quentin.
So I saw in some of the San Quentin newspapers after I had left there, on some pretty shady circumstances. I saw that you were in arts and corrections, and you were in. Every time I would get a San Quentin newspaper, I would see you in different programs, and I thought, wow, Tommy's moving along there. It was so maybe you could give me an idea, like your progression there, like from getting there into, different things you were involved with, and what the benefit was, maybe.
Yeah, when I got there, my dad had just died. I remember being called in the counselor's office in another prison, and my brother was on the phone, and they told me my dad died, and I walked out of there. I was very stoic. I didn't tell one other guy on the yard. I didn't tell anybody that my dad had just died. And I stayed there probably 6 months after that, and I had some pretty close friends there, and none of them knew. And so I got to San Quentin with a lot of weight on my shoulders with that, and I immediately rushed over to education to sign up for college, and eventually got into that program,
Hmm.
which was a pretty good program. And I got back in the sheet metal shop, started doing vocations, and started meeting other lifers that were telling me, "Oh, this is how it works here," and you just kind of learning the ropes of. I've always been a pretty patient guy, and um, being patient and observing what's going on around me kind of helped me survive. So I started to pick up like, okay, this is what I need to do to get out of prison. And eventually I started to see the benefits of actually participating in some of these groups and getting a better understanding of who I was. And like I said, how I had got to the place in my life where I could take someone else's life, and why I was hooked on drugs when I was younger. And dealing with addictions and things like of that nature. Eventually, I credit college really with turning my life around because it gave me the skill to think critically. It gave me the critical
Right.
thinking skills I needed in my life.
Hmm.
Some other groups really helped. I didn't have much empathy for people, and that's sad to say. I had to learn about that in some of these groups. Um, but once you have that understanding or that awakening, I guess, in your life, it's hard to go back. You've
Right.
been awakened, and you can forget about that for a time, but it doesn't go away. And that
Yeah.
eventually changed my life and gave me a better understanding who I was and allowed me to open up to the world. I've always been a very shy person.
And so, being around guys who you knew in other prisons and other guys like like you didn't really know me until I met you there, and then other guys that you don't really know, but they're lifers, and they've been through the shit, the violence and madness and politics, but you see them involved in these programs that some guys in other prisons that say, "Oh, that's pussy shit" or whatever. Like you see them involved in it, did that give you kind of like a green light, like, hey, this is an all right thing to participate in, and
Definitely. And, that was another thing. That's the first time I felt like I was part of a community. And that's sad to say, even when I was growing up, anywhere like that,
right,
same thing felt like a community to me, and people genuinely, genuinely cared about each other there, whether it was the free people coming in or, just the guys on the yard. And I felt like people actually cared about me and cared what happened to me. And that was gave me the confidence to go into some of these groups and follow their example. The guys that had been around a lot, and you're still living this kind of uh, two two people in the same world, right? Like there's the guys on the yard that don't participate, that are still stuck on their old politics, for whatever glory's sake, which they're not really politicking on a level 2 yard, but they have this mentality about them, and
mm-hmm.
and you realize that's all like a sham. We're all people inside. We're all human, and we're all experiencing emotions, whether you shut those off or not. And realizing like this is who I am, and I'm just going to show up in the world every day the way I am, and people can either like it or lump it, you
Right,
know, and just take that into that bravery that I had to go out on the yard when I thought I was going to die, and still show up when I was 20 years old, knowing someone could be potentially trying to kill me that day. Just having that same bravery just to show up and let someone see who I was, really, that
right,
was a lot harder, honestly.
yeah, yeah. You take that facade down, man, and you just go out there like, hey, this is me. It's you got to have a thick skin because different people are going to react to it differently. But I thought for me, being myself is And even when I was kind of an asshole, you know, I used to tell guys at San Quentin, "Oh, you're gonna go get a San Quentin education, huh, buddy?" You know, I tell them, you know, you're gonna die in here just like me, asshole. You know, I was kind of an asshole. You know, I had a bad attitude. I've been to board like 13 times, and I canceled 9 hearings. You know, I was a pretty negative guy, but I mean that was kind of me. And but even I had some positive things going on, but uh, you know, it's harder, but it's easier too. It's kind of a it's hard to explain to people that haven't been in prison. Like when you take that facade down and show people who you really are, it's like you don't know what to expect, you know. But the people who are genuine give you a positive feedback on it. You know, it's cool.
Definitely, and I think like my whole world changed when I started doing that. Like you said, you start seeing me in the newspaper pretty regularly, and it was because I was participating, I was involved, and out of that grew a lot of connections. A lot of people opened up to me about who they were genuinely, and my whole life changed. I eventually met my wife,
Mm,
um, and I was able to open myself up to her, through letters and visits. Something that I wouldn't have been able to do 10 years prior to that.
yeah,
So I like to say I grew up. I
yeah,
like to say I turned from a kid to a man in there, and I
right,
really did. And I wasn't as afraid to be who I genuinely am. And, like you said, it takes a thick skin because there are those guys that are going to be talking shit, and you start to reflect on that. But at the end of the day, you start to realize, like, yeah, those are the guys that aren't being genuine who they are because
yeah,
nobody wants to go to fucking prison. Prison fucking sucks, right?
yeah,
And
yeah, it does.
whoever likes prison is either a liar or a moron, one
Yeah.
of the two.
I didn't like it, but you know, there was a time I didn't think I was ever going to get out. So, you know, I was kind of bitter about that.
No, I get that, and there's no reason why you shouldn't be bitter about that. It, but there's also this place in there, like where I came to in my incarceration, where I felt like I had become free.